everybody, to the Co-Movement Health Podcast. I'm Andrew, and I'm joined today by Kristy from Root Down Wellness. And you work with corporations, businesses, and with people to try to teach contemplative practices to try to help the business function better and the people within it function better, the team get along better, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Our topic today, we're going to be talking a little bit about, it's a kind of a broad topic, but meditation, and we might go into things like Buddhism or some of the other contemplative practices, Zen, yoga, that kind of stuff. And the reason we're talking about this, this is mostly a health and fitness podcast, but certainly mental health is a massive part of what health is. So we don't want to neglect any aspects. And me personally, I've been super fascinated by all these topics for a long time. I've read a lot of books on Buddhism and ego, and listened to lots of speakers like Eckhart Tolle and Alan Watts, the sort of people we all know. If you've ever looked into this before. And I know that you're a lot further along down the path than I am, as far as you've been doing this stuff and thinking about it a lot longer. You could probably articulate it a lot better than me. So I'm just really excited to hear your take on a lot of these things. And I've got a set of notes so we can touch on various topics. But to hear your perspective and then how you use it in the world and what benefits you think it can have for others.
Perfect.
And wherever else we go with this.
Awesome. I'm excited to be here.
All right. Well, so maybe I was thinking we could start off with, there's a few concepts that before we actually get into like meditation and stuff like that, there's a few concepts from these Eastern traditions that are kind of hard to wrap your mind around. And I thought maybe we'd touch on those really quick before we go anywhere else.
Okay.
How about the concept of non-duality? we're beginning with a really tough one right here.
That is a tough one to start with. I
have, because I knew I was gonna ask these things. So I have kind of my own answers to these questions.
Let's see what you got.
Oh, you want me to begin?
Well, as far as for the listeners, like they hear a term like non-duality and they may have absolutely like no starting point of what that might mean. And, when talking about things like meditation and contemplative practices. So, what do you got?
So, to me, non-duality is basically the idea of the primacy of consciousness. That reality is like this single unified thing. It's one. It's a concept. Oneness is a term you hear a lot. So reality, when you get to the fundamental base layer of reality, it's one single unified thing, and that thing is consciousness or awareness, or there's a lot of different terms people use for this sort of thing. So I guess what I'm saying is like the dualistic notion is that we have, there's mind and matter, or there's self and other, good and bad, likes and don't likes. And so non-duality is breaking down these separations and seeing everything as one instead of separate. Neutral
witness is, I think, a term I hear a lot.
I like the use of the word witness.
Because we're all just kind of witnessing everything, and we label everything, and through our labeling of, well, I like this, or I don't like this, or this is good, or this is bad, you're just feeding into that dualistic mindset. And like in the Buddhist tradition, it seems like they view like most of suffering comes from this dualistic perspective on reality. And if we can sort of neutralize that and start to just see everything as, well, this is just what it is. It doesn't necessarily need to be broken apart and labeled into, well, I'm going to gravitate towards this, but I'm going to move away from this. It's like, seeking a perspective of literally everything, which is very, very challenging. You're trying not to push anything away or hold on to anything too tight. So, aversion and attachment. Like I like something, I'm going to run towards it. I don't like it, I'm going to run away from it. Trying to stay like, in the middle of all of that and see that it's part of the same thing. That it's all a part of this oneness. And I mean, oneness is in pretty much every religious
Yeah.
background, you know, spiritual background. It's an ancient idea that, you know, is really, really hard for humans, I think, to wrap their brain around.
I love this because you just, in that answer, you touched on so many of the things that I have like further notes for. But yeah, the aversion and attachment, the fact that that's where all of our you know, cravings and aversions and fears and stuff come from. So they taught that was you know, the attachment to things is kind of the root of suffering there.
Yeah.
So that's where all that springs from. How do you feel about that? Like me personally, as someone who's just learning about this stuff, or sporadically over the course of several years, I definitely wrestle with the notion of non-duality a little bit, you know, because we certainly feel ourselves as separate from the rest of the world. I have to say I'm kind of agnostic on it. I'm like, at times I'm sold, and then other times like my mind doubts it a little bit. So I guess I would say that I don't necessarily see how consciousness is the root of all existence, you know, and that matter doesn't actually exist, but
it's tough because we're sitting here feeling our bodies, and it feels like something, and this table feels like something. And so it's all perception. I think everything comes down to perception. But like when we talk about, you know, non-duality and, you know, there's really no good and bad. It's really hard as humans when we see like incredible evil and incredible like love and beauty and joy and generosity. And it's like, these two things seem so completely different. How could they be a part of the same field? But I think that's what we should try to wrap our brain around, this idea that nothing is separate from anything else, and that everything is just a part of infinite expression. So, you know, this idea of oneness, this one idea of like a field of consciousness, that like there's really only one pulsing, living, breathing thing. And we're just all an expression of it. We're like an experience, you know, that's happening through and within this field. So if you see something that feels like, oh my God, that is just so dark and so evil, and like, how could that be a part of things that are so good and beautiful and pure? I think that's where it gets really challenging. I mean, the we're not solid thing is like, that's a big one to overcome. But as far as like a field of consciousness where everything is already there, it just is. And we're just witnesses to it. And so we can either get like really worked up about it and like, oh my God, I want to hold on to this forever. Or, oh my God, this is hideous, I don't even want to look at it. You know, that's sort of what I think the Buddhists were speaking to, is like, can we sit with what is? Can we be with what is as it is, as a neutral witness, and not get so wrapped up in it? It's lofty. It's hard to apply that to like a daily human life where all these things are coming at you. But I also think it's a really useful, helpful thing to contemplate, because let's say you are in a really uncomfortable situation. You know, if you can sort of remind yourself that, first of all, it's transient. And that's like one of my favorite takeaways from Buddhism, is the idea of impermanence, and that nothing, it's like the only constant in the universe, that everything is going to change. So everything that we experience is transient. So if you're experiencing something uncomfortable, to recognize that, and to recognize that like, this is just part of what is right now, and it's passing through. So that can, I think, help people galvanize the inner resources to actually just stand your ground and get through that, as opposed to getting worked up and your nervous system freaking out.
That's awesome. Yeah, that impermanence is definitely a worthwhile concept to keep in mind.